100 boats and 1,000 sailors fight for victory in one of the world's toughest yacht races.
It's supposed to be a test to the male ego and all that type of thing.
But polar winds trigger one of the deadliest storms of the century.
The wind, the waves, the currents came together and produced a perfect storm.
Wild weather hits the Sydney-Hobart fleet.
There are conditions at sea that men and boats simply cannot withstand, and that's where we ended up.
What started as a battle for glory quickly turns into a race for survival. In a violent storm, yachtsman Peter Meikle holds his friend's life in his hands.
I let him go.
American John Campbell is now stranded 120 kilometers from land. If he's not rescued soon, he'll die.
What a sight. Guns gone and they're away.
December 26th, 1998. It's the day after Christmas, and 115 yachts jostle for position at the start of Australia's premier ocean race from Sydney to Hobart. The boats fight for every inch of water, every breath of wind to gain an early advantage. They streak across the world's largest natural harbour, pursued by a flotilla of press boats and well-wishers.
Spectacular start here as they carve their way towards Sydney Head.
All classes of yacht compete, from professionally crewed 24-metre-long racers to simple 12-metre boats manned by amateurs. They race 1,066 kilometres down the east coast of Australia, across the Tasman Sea to Hobart, the capital of Tasmania. The yachts are brutally exposed to one of the roughest and most treacherous waters on the planet, the Southern Ocean. The competition takes an average of 3 days to complete, and sailors call it hell on high water.
It's quite something to achieve that you've actually raced in the Sydney-Hobart race.
Helicopter pilot Gary Ticehurst is filming the event for the Australian television network ABC. It's Gary's 16th year covering the race.
So it's always interesting each year to see what's been pitted against the elements.
Thousands upon thousands of spectators lining every headland. This is the greatest ocean race in the world.
Sailing out of Sydney Harbour with all that commotion and the helicopters, it's really one of the most thrilling experiences of my life.
American John Campbell is part of a 10-man team on board the yacht Kingara.
His crew had worked together for years. I was kind of the outsider, the Yank, as they like to call it. But it was fun. He's a good group of guys.
Crewing alongside John is Australian Peter Meikle. They've known each other for 7 years. This is their third attempt to get to Hobart.
You get 10 guys and put them on a boat, and there's a lot of stories, a lot of laughing. It's a bit smelly, but it's an adventure.
Mike Marshman from Adelaide is crewing on board rival yacht Stand Aside. Marshman, like most Australians, takes his sport seriously.
You've got to get wet, got to get hurt, got to get hungry. It makes the beer taste better at the other end when you get there.
Mike epitomizes the world of competitive sailing. He lives for the adrenaline buzz and is prepared to take anything the race can throw at him.
It's just a fantastic thing to do. Adrenaline rush at the start, adrenaline rush at the finish, and a bit of pain in the middle.
The yachts tack out of Sydney Harbour into the Pacific Ocean. They pick up a 20 knots northeasterly, the ideal wind to blow them south to Hobart.
We're past the sea mark now, with spinnakers are set, and we are now heading south. This is the run.
A powerful sea current is flowing in the same direction.
It was a great start to the race. It was as good as it gets. I don't think we'd had a faster trip down that first part.
This could be a record year. They unfurl vast downwind sails called spinnakers, and immediately the bigger yachts, like the American-owned Sayonara, start to pull ahead. 10 kilometers away, at the Bureau of Meteorology in Sydney, official race forecaster Ken Batt studies the updated weather charts. A chill creeps down his spine. A storm is developing in the Tasman Sea.
When I saw those conditions being forecast, it didn't sort of sit very well with me.
Cold and warm fronts are forming a complex low-pressure system. It's compounded by high-altitude polar winds circling the Antarctic, moving unusually far north, and colliding with warm air from the opposite direction. This front of cold air is sucking the warm air out of the system, creating a rapid drop in pressure. High-speed winds and vast waves now look likely.
The excitement, exhilaration quickly vanished and was replaced by, well, I suppose in a way, fear.
The last time Ken saw weather like this was in 1993, when gale force winds battered the sailors for 4 days. 66 boats abandoned the competition, and for the first time in the race's history, 2 yachts were destroyed. Ken and his team fear that if the weather deteriorates further, this year could be worse. At 2:14 p.m, he issues a priority storm warning to the fleet. It forecasts that 26 hours into the race, the yachts will encounter wind speeds of up to 55 knots, 102 kilometers per hour. It's classified as a Force 10 storm.
Expanded search and rescue.
Marine broadcast and rescue services are put on alert.
Sydney Hobart competitors have begun preparing for the worst. The fierce southerly expected to hit the fleet on their first night at sea.
The warning is relayed via radio to the yachts. But the sailors regard the message as a challenge rather than an order. Not one of the 115 boats turns back. The yachtsmen and women are now sailing into what could be the most violent ocean storm in Australian history. By now, the adrenaline is pumping. Conditions are perfect. The pace is fierce. Leading the field is the bookies' favourite, Sayonara. The 24-metre yacht battles with the Australian boat, Brindabella.
Brindabella's right up there and level.
Mike Marshman and 11 crewmates on board Stand Aside chase the leaders. They are pushing the boat as hard as they can. Stand Aside is a lightweight fiberglass racer. She weighs just 5.5 tons. The yacht's clean lines, shallow hull and tall rig are designed to give her a lighter and faster ride. But the team is so determined to win its class, they've removed lead stabilizers from her keel for increased speed. Stand Aside can now surf the water at 37 kilometers per hour.
We broke all the speed records on Stand Aside, so the atmosphere of all the crew on board was fantastic.
Kingara is in the middle of the same pack and sailing on her limit.
was just fantastic. It was just going like a train. It was handling beautifully. It was in its element. They were the conditions for that boat because it's bulletproof.
Kingara is a 13-metre-long, single-masted wooden yacht. She was built in 1972, but what she lacks in high technology, she makes up for in experience. Kingara has 13 Sydney to Hobart races under her sail. She even survived the notorious 1993 race. Back at the Bureau of Meteorology in Sydney, forecaster Ken Batt is anxiously poring over computer weather models.
When we saw the model output, we basically said amongst ourselves that there would be a massacre.
At 3:53 p.m, nearly 3 hours into the race, Ken sends out a second, more severe high seas weather warning. It cautions that the low-pressure system is deepening. In 24 hours, the sea will go from rough to very rough, making waves up to 6 meters in height. The forecast is sent down the wire to the yachts, but it still doesn't deter the sailors. American yachtsman John Campbell expects the race to be tough.
We weren't terribly concerned about our safety at that point. It was more, here we go again, this is another tough year, but it didn't necessarily put us off.
Again, the yachtsmen fail to realize the importance of the warning. Not one boat abandons the competition.
Well, I felt quite sick because friends, acquaintances were sailing south into this.
Ken has good reason to worry. The storm is deepening over the most dangerous stretch of water on the race route, the Bass Strait. Locals refer to it as the Black Hole. The current in the Bass Strait flows west to east. As the current driving the fleet down the coast of Australia enters the strait, the two forces clash. The result is rough water. The strait is just 50 meters deep, and the shallow ocean makes the choppy waters even more turbulent. But the weather has another deadly card to play. The polar jet streams entering the system from the south push the low pressure east. This causes the northeasterly winds to change direction and rotate a full 180 degrees to a southwesterly. The wind now moves in the opposite direction to the prevailing ocean current. It's a lethal combination. Steep-sided waves, 6 meters high, can materialize out of nowhere.
The wind, the waves, the currents came together and produced, for want of a better term, the perfect storm.
By midnight, Stand Aside is approaching the Bass Strait. An electric storm lights the night sky, and the 12-man crew encounter the first signs of trouble brewing.
To have fork lightning in front, behind, left and right of you, it was just fantastic scenery. But when you've got 68 foot of aluminium being held up by steel rigging, it's a bit unnerving.
24 kilometers behind Stand Aside, Kingara is cutting through steep-sided 3-meter-high waves. But the yacht and her seasoned crew take it in their stride.
By the time I came up on watch at midnight, we were really getting into the first part of the serious weather. Other than being cold and wet, we made it through really without too much difficulty that first night.
The next morning, ABC helicopter pilot Gary Ticehurst takes off from Merimbula and heads out to film the race leaders. He's heard the weather reports and knows the conditions will make spectacular footage. Within 25 minutes, he's filming race leaders Sayonara and Brindabella fighting 15-meter waves in storm force winds. He captures ocean racing at its most extreme.
We just basically felt, well, this is a challenge for the yacht, but it'll be good vision for us.
Sayonara just sliding away, making great speed, way above the average needed to set a course record in this 630-mile dash to Hobart.
Ticehurst struggles at the controls as gusting winds buffet the chopper. He can feel the weather is taking a turn for the worse.
And that's when it all started to go wrong.
At 2 p.m, the first distress call. The yacht, called the Sword of Orion, is in trouble in the Bass Strait. She's battling wind gusts of 144 kilometers per hour.
We are experiencing 78 knots.
On the Beaufort scale, it's a hurricane. The larger yachts, like Sayonara, start vaulting off the tops of the waves. 20 smaller yachts hear Sword of Orion's warning. They abandon the race and head for shelter on the Australian mainland. But there are still nearly 1,000 men and women and 95 vessels approximately 60 kilometers from land, fighting the elements. What started as a race for glory is on the verge of becoming a catastrophe. By the second day of the Sydney-Hobart yacht race, most of the fleet still have to enter the black hole. On board Stand Aside, the gung-ho spirit is starting to dampen.
You couldn't look into the oncoming wind because it was blowing the water off the waves, and it was like darts hitting you in the face.
The sailors now face a dilemma. They can tough it out and keep going, or turn around and abandon the race. But turning back means sailing into high-speed, gusting winds, even shallower waters and steeper waves. For the crew of Stand Aside, the decision is simple.
I wanted to keep on going. It would be a thrilling thing to get your name on the podium of the Sydney to Hobart.
But their yacht is struggling in the raging storm. They sail parallel to waves of up to 18 meters in height. It's called sailing beam on and makes for a smoother ride, but Stand Aside is vulnerable. If a large breaker were to hit her, she would capsize. It's a sailor's greatest fear, known as a knockdown. The crew know they are sailing on a knife edge. They fight to keep control and battle on. "24 kilometers north of Stand Aside, the older, heavier yacht Kingara is coping better. She sails directly into the waves, and because she is lower in the water, she cuts through them. But with waves of up to 3 stories high, it's a bumpy ride for the 10 crewmen on board. 2:15 p.m. The race is in its 25th hour. The majority of the fleet are nearing the mouth of the Bass Strait. Wind speed is increased to 80 knots, 148 kilometers per hour. The ocean is a raging maelstrom. Stand Aside continues to sail beam on and carries one small sail, a storm jib. The crew hunker down and hold on. A huge breaking wall of water, 28 meters high, slams into the side of the hull. The mast immediately snaps. The yacht capsizes under the weight of water. This is the knockdown they fear. 12 men plunge into the foaming seas.
All of a sudden you're underwater, but the quietness was the first sensation I noticed, and all the bubbles coming up towards you.
Stand Aside rolls and starts to right herself again, dragging her crew with her.
We were ripped through the water with a huge force, and you're supposed to come up the other side. I didn't come up.
Mike is trapped in the rigging of the broken mast. He realizes he is facing death.
So at that stage, I said basically my goodbyes. I was quite calm. I remember seeing my 3 kids' faces that I could actually reach out and touch them. It was so clear.
As the oxygen level in Mike's blood plummets, he starts to black out. His vision dims.
My vision wasn't back yet. I was still seeing double and really wasn't getting a lot of light in my eyes.
Mike is blacking out. In one last Herculean effort, he breaks free and kicks for the surface. His mates drag him back into the boat, but their ordeal is far from over. The yacht is barely afloat, the mast has gone, and part of the cabin roof has ripped off.
We knew at that stage if the boat took another way or got hit, it would have sunk.
Their only chance of survival is the 2 life rafts. Each contains vital survival gear and can take 6 men. The first inflates on impact with the water. They tie the lanyard to the stern to secure it and throw in the second. To their horror, it fails to inflate. Before they can grab it, it slips away.
So it was a bit unnerving when you've got 12 blokes looking at one 6-man life raft.
The 12 men decide to stick together and take their chances on board the sinking yacht. They frantically start to bail and begin hurling as much equipment as they can overboard.
The boat was in terrible condition. Just looking at it, a half full of water, we had to bail it. And I knew at that stage, if we had to get out of there under our own steam, it would have been very difficult.
The yacht's entire communication system is flooded. Their destiny now lies with an old VHF radio. They send out a mayday and hope someone hears them. The situation is now critical.
Mayday, this is Stand Aside. Mayday, mayday.
Australian search and rescue services on the mainland pick up Stand Aside's cry for help. They relay the message to the nearest helicopter in the area. ABC pilot Gary Ticehurst is the closest man to the scene. He's just 64 kilometers south of the stricken yacht. Search and rescue ask him to locate the boat and report back on the situation.
And then we really turned from being a media helicopter to really a search and rescue helicopter trying to find yachts that were in trouble.
Ticehurst sets the coordinates for his chopper and fights his way through the storm force winds.
And the wind was so strong it was just taking the tops off these waves going across the ocean.
After 15 minutes, he reaches Stand Aside. This is the actual footage Ticehurst shoots at the scene.
When we got to Standerside and found Standerside, we couldn't believe the conditions were so bad and had deteriorated so much. 70-knot winds, 100-foot waves, and there was a yacht in the water with half its deck gone and most of the roof gone.
Ticehurst holds his course in the headwind and establishes radio contact with the crew below. But all he can offer are words of support and the promise that help is on its way.
1 mile with dislocated knee. Over.
It's a devastating blow for the morale of the men.
Automatically just thought we were going to get rescued. We watched too much TV, I think.
400 kilometres away on the Australian mainland, paramedic Peter Davidson is nearing the end of his shift.
It was a very quiet day. I literally had my feet up on the desk. I had a cup of tea in my hand and I was watching the cricket on television.
Peter works for Air Ambulance Services, a search and rescue operation based out of Latrobe Valley in the state of Victoria.
I was pretty much in wind-down mode, as you could well imagine. The last thing I wanted right then was another job to take me into overtime.
An urgent message comes in, giving the coordinates of an emergency in the Bass Strait.
You've got a beacon, guys.
The message is brief. Davidson and his team head for their chopper, unsure of what they will find. As they set off, the scale of the carnage is being broadcast to the outside world.
A rescue operation's underway off the coast of Victoria tonight as wild weather hits the Sydney-Hobart fleet. Crew members of Standerside have abandoned ship. Rescue helicopters are on their way to winch them to safety.
The crew of Standerside have been waiting for help to arrive for an hour and 20 minutes. Eventually, they see the chopper break through the clouds.
I still had no doubt that he was going to rescue us. If I was going to get rescued, I was going in that helicopter. Nothing was going to stop me.
But on board the helicopter, Davidson and his team are unsure if they can rescue them at all. In the heavy swell, Standerside is a constantly moving target. To add to the challenge, the chopper is being buffeted by the storm. It is impossible to hold position.
It was just absolutely mind-blowing. I was in the back there looking out the window just thinking, this is just impossible. I was petrified at the thought of having to get into this, and I was just thinking it's going to be suicide if we got out.
In these conditions, being lowered directly on board the yacht is highly dangerous. Davidson could be killed if he's thrown against the boat. He instructs the sailors to get into the life raft, 2 at a time. The pilot will hover over the raft and lower him into it. The plan is straightforward, but Davidson knows that rescuing all 12 men is an almost impossible task.
When we slid this door back, we were hit with this needle-type rain with such ferocity that it actually hurt you to look out and be struck by the rain in the face. And if I was totally honest, I would have to say that I think I was initially getting out the door so they could see that I was making an attempt, because I just did not think I could get there.
On the boat, Mike Marshman is elected to be the first into the raft. But he's unsure whether he too can make it.
It was moving at a great rate. I didn't want to jump in the water and have to get into the life raft. So I made sure I hit dead centre.
He makes it. Now Davidson is lowered from the chopper into the blasting winds. ABC pilot Gary Ticehurst hovers nearby, camera rolling. Within seconds, Davidson is hit by a massive wave.
What I could see was that he was being dunked like a tea bag into this huge ocean and dragged all around the place by the chopper and the wire.
As Davidson is dragged through the first wave, he has just moments to breathe before being struck by the next.
I just remember tumbling and tumbling over and over. I didn't know which way was up. I was thinking to myself, I'm going to drown here straight away, and I haven't even attempted to get to anybody yet.
Davidson is bounced and dragged in and out of the surf. Rescue is beginning to look hopeless. Eventually, Davidson reaches the life raft. But just as he grabs the side, he's slammed away.
I was just totally at its mercy. I know that there was just nothing I could have done if it didn't want me to do it. You get to know in this job that if the ocean wants you, it'll take you.
He summons his strength for one last attempt. This time, he makes it. He immediately straps Mike Marshman into the harness and gives the signal to go.
To have somebody in this harness at that point in time, for me, was just a feeling of absolute elation, absolute satisfaction, and I have never felt the strength of this feeling either prior to this incident or since this incident.
Ticehurst can't believe what he's filming.
Mate, this is award-winning stuff here. You realise that, don't you?
They hang on and are winched to safety. The sense of relief for Mike is overwhelming.
I honestly believe the feeling after fear is the greatest feeling. The more the fear, the greater the feeling afterwards.
But Davidson has just begun. With one in the bag, he's winched back down to rescue the next man. The ordeal continues for over an hour. In total, Davidson and the Air Ambulance Service rescue 8 men from the sinking Stand Aside. The remaining sailors are picked up by a second chopper. Remarkably, there are no serious injuries. Ticehurst's footage of the daring rescue is broadcast around the world. But the good news is short-lived. The first fatalities of the doomed race are reported.
At least 2 people have been killed and 10 others are missing in the worst disaster ever to hit the Sydney Hobart Classic. A huge rescue operation continues tonight.
The storm shows no signs of abating. For the other competitors, the battle is no longer to win the race, but to stay alive. Less than 24 kilometers north of the abandoned Stand Aside, Kingara is hurtling into the eye of the storm. On board are John Campbell and Peter Meikle.
We started to realise that, we were truly in survival mode. Not the traditional survival mode, which is let's not break the boat so we can still be competitive, but the actual real survival, like not get dead.
By 7 p.m, 4 of the 10-man crew, including John Campbell, are hunkered down on deck. Suddenly, an enormous wall of water comes out of nowhere.
So I don't really remember seeing or hearing anything other than... Hey, watch out! And that was about it.
The wave smashes John into the yacht's heavy compass. breaking his cheek and jaw.
The most eerie thing was I looked around, and whereas there'd been 4 of us on the deck, I couldn't see anyone. I couldn't see anyone at all.
John is knocked overboard. He floats unconscious and injured in the turbulence. His harness is now his only lifeline. Peter Meikle immediately starts to pull him in. But John's harness is built into his jacket, and as he's lifted on board, it slips over his head. Meikle grabs his hand, but in the pitching seas, John's a dead weight.
Then I let him go. It was like it was happening to someone else, but I knew this was not good.
John is now floating unhitched and unconscious in the violent sea. As each second passes, he drifts further and further from the boat.
It's a pretty scary moment when you realize that you're alone, treading water, miles offshore, and the only thing you can see is a small sailboat half a mile away.
He starts to swim, but his boots and trousers slow him down. He kicks them off. Now all he's wearing is thermal underwear. He's losing heat fast and getting weaker with every minute.
It was very clear to me that, I likely would not survive this.
The water temperature is 18 degrees Celsius. Normal body temperature is 37 degrees. When his body temperature drops to 30 degrees, he will fall unconscious. At 26 degrees, he will die. He's running out of time. At Malakuta, the Victoria Police Air Wing lift off to make the 120-kilometre journey to the Bass Strait. At the controls is pilot Daryl Jones.
We had waves of up to 90 feet. And yeah, it was just generally quite a mess. Some of the worst conditions I've ever flown in.
The aircraft's emergency tracking system is immediately jammed with distress calls.
It was just absolute bedlam out there. And of course all the emergency beacons going off, our tracking system in the aircraft was just going ballistic. And it just couldn't handle that many emergency beacons all at once.
Rescue crewman David Key allocates one alert as priority: man overboard. Soon they are battling through the storm to Kingara's last known position. But the team knows spotting a man in the turbulent sea is unlikely, particularly in fading light. Below them, a disorientated and delirious John Campbell sees the chopper on the horizon.
Seeing the helicopter was, one of those images that I'll never forget. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that a helicopter would be out in these conditions.
John has now been in the water for 30 minutes. His body temperature is plummeting.
I replayed it in my mind 1,000 times. I certainly feel like that was it for me. If the helicopter does not find me, I'm not going to survive.
In the air, the rescue team must soon turn back. Their fuel gauge is low. The light is fading.
The dilemma that you face if you stay out a couple of minutes longer, well, that's a couple of minutes fuel you need to get back in.
The chopper turns for home. Then, in the vast grey swell, they see a dark shape. It's Campbell. But spotting him is one thing. Rescuing him seems impossible.
If you give up, you know that that fellow's going to die.
David Key hooks himself onto the wire and steps into the elements. As Darryl Jones struggles to hold position, David is inched into the abyss.
The first thing I noticed when I went out was just the ferocity of the wind. It was just absolutely just thumping into me.
In the cockpit, the radar altimeter measures the distance between the helicopter and the surface of the water. Darryl Jones can't believe what he's reading.
I had 100 feet held on the radar. When a wave passed underneath us, the needle on the radar came from 100 feet back to 10 feet. So we're having 90-foot waves basically passed under us.
Dangling helpless beneath the chopper, David Key is swept up in the massive swell before being slammed back down into its depths.
And then just the complete silence and the darkness. And then bang, out the back of it. And because it's virtually solid, I was actually falling out the back of the wave. And then I'd hit the water again and come back up and look up, and there's another one right in front of me. And it's just, I kept thinking, God, here we go again. I don't know how much more of this I can take.
He is tossed and bludgeoned as each wave sweeps over him. Huge walls of water catch him again and again. Eventually, he surfaces, gasping for air, right next to John Campbell.
Probably would have only been about 10 feet from me. I had a good look at his face, and you could just see it was just absolutely smashed in on one side. So I just put the strop on him, but he couldn't really help me because he was just completely limp.
David signals to be lifted up, and the two men are winched skyward. The helicopter is now low on fuel. But as the cable pulls the two men to the door of the chopper, the winch jams. Moisture in the air causes a short circuit to its electrical supply. The pair hang helpless, out of reach of Barry Barclay, the winchman. Buffeted by the howling winds, John starts slipping out of his harness.
I was utterly exhausted. I had almost no ability to hang on, so I think I was completely at the mercy of Dave and his ability to keep me attached to the harness.
So I managed to grab Campbell's his bottom and started to push him up through the harness, and I managed to push him up far enough that Barry could grab a great handful of his long johns and gave him the biggest wedgie I could ever think of and just pulled him up into the helicopter door.
Inside the cabin, Campbell immediately goes into shock. His blood pressure is dropping rapidly. His internal organs aren't receiving the oxygen they need and are in danger of shutting down. Pilot Darryl Jones heads for land. He wills the aircraft through the screaming winds. He knows the fuel level is now dangerously low.
Maybe that's one of the reasons I'm still here, is it pushed the survival instinct a bit harder to get me home.
At 8:15 p.m, they touch down on the first available land, a local football field. The engine runs out of fuel 40 seconds later. Campbell is rushed to hospital. He is suffering from hypothermia, has a broken nose and jaw, and a smashed cheekbone. It takes John weeks to recover. He is one of the lucky ones.
At least 2 people have been killed and 10 others are missing in the worst disaster.
The death toll from the Sydney to Hobart race has reached 5 in what is now one of Australia's worst yachting disasters.
When the race is over and all are accounted for, 6 sailors are dead. "55 people are winched to safety. 46 are injured. The race is won by Sayonara, but the cheering crowds that usually greet the winner are absent. "115 yachts started the race. Just 44 make it to Hobart. It is the worst sailing disaster in Australian history. But one of the world's toughest ocean races continues, and there are few who want it any other way.
Encountering a storm, was that the thrill of ocean racing? Absolutely. That's what you do it for, to get out the other side.
Would I do a Sydney to Hobart again? If the opportunity arose, maybe. It's certainly not something I'm losing sleep over.
I'd want to see the boat first, and I'd probably have a little bit of a look at the weather forecast, but otherwise I'd be there.